Today's daf is daf Kuf Tes Vav, and we'll begin on Kuf Yud Daled Omid Beis, and we count up 6 lines up before the end of the Amud, and we're talking about Mechusar Zman, when a person is not yet ready for his carbon, like for example, a Mitzora or a Nazir Yoletis, they haven't yet gone through and completed the process of Tara, and then they shechted the carbon prematurely outside of the Mikdash. And the Mishnah had established that in such a case, since it's not Roy Lavo Lifnei Ol Moed, meaning it cannot be brought inside the Mikdash, therefore you're not chayav outside the Mikdash. But Amar Rav Chilkiah, and he's the son of Tuvi, so it should say Bar Rav Tuvi, Lo Shanu Elo Lishmo. Rav Chilkiah has a paradoxical halacha. He says that when is he exempt from chutz, from shechting the animal, the carbon bachutz? That's only because he shechted it lishma. Now, let's say, for example, he took an asham of a Mitzora Nazir prematurely, and he shechted it outside, and he shechted l'shem that carbon. So that's not Roy Lovo Pesach Ol Moed, because it's premature, and had he brought it l'shma in the Beis HaMikdash, it would be possible. But Aval, and here's the paradox, Shelo l'shmo chayav. If he shechted it outside the Mikdash prematurely, in such a case he'll be chayav if he shechted it shelo lishma. It's very odd. We're in a sense upgrading a shelo lishma above a lishma, and the Gemara is going to analyze that. And the logic that underlies Rav Chilkiah is hoel v'roy shelo lishmo b'fnim. So for this, we go back to the first Mishnah in Maseches Zevachim, and the halacha is that if the shechita was done shelo lishma, then it's kosher, but eino ola l'baylim l'shem chova. So paradoxically, here he's going to be chayav for a shelo lishma, because had he done it shelo lishma inside the mikdash, the carbon would still be kosher. So the Gemara says, "Hachi lishmo nami nechayev." If he shechted it lishma, why not say the same thing, that it's still roy lavo lepesach ol moed, because had he shechted it shelo lishma in the mikdash, it would be kosher. And the Gemara answers, "Boy akira." So in the case of a shechita lishma, you would require akira. Akira means when you undermine and cancel the name of the carbon. And he hasn't done an akira. So, for example, if he shechts it lishma, there's no akira there. And only when there's an akira, then you could say, for example, if he shechted shelo lishma, that had he shechted it shelo lishma in the Mikdash, let's say, for example, he shechted an asham l'shem ola, then the carbon would be kosher, and therefore outside the Mikdash he shechted shelo lishma, and he took this premature asham and he shechted it l'shem ola, he would be chayav, because the carbon of shelo lishma in the Mikdash, which is called an akira, would generate a kashrus hakarbon. It would be a valid carbon. But in the case where he shechted lishma, then there was no akira. He didn't alter the purpose of the name of the carbon, Maskif lo Rav Huna. I don't get the whole logic here, says Rav Huna. Yesh lecha davar she'eno kosher lishmo v'kosher lo lishmo. You're saying, Rav Chilkiah, that if you shecht this premature carbon shalolishma, then we consider it as if you shechted a carbon kosher chutz lemigdash, and you're liable for that. But had you shechted it lishma, then you would not be liable because there was no akira, as we said before. And had you shechted it inside the migdash and it's premature, it would be possible. So how could it be, this is counterintuitive, asks Rav Huna, that according to Rav Chilkiah, if it was shalol lishma, it's kosher, meaning he's chayav, and if it was lishma, he's potter, as if to say it's possible. How could lishma be worse than shalol lishma? So the Gemara tries to reject Rav Huna's argument by showing a precedent where it goes that way. Dafka shalol lishma is kosher, v'lo. Let's take the example of Pesach b'Shayimos Hashana. Now, in Pesach b'Shayimos Hashana, which means before Yudaled ben Nisan, it's going to be kosher if you shechted shalol lishma. If you shechted lishma, then we have a different halacha that Pesach shalol b'zmano sheshachta lishma is possible. But oddly enough, if it's shalol lishma, then it becomes what's called a carbon shlamim, and the whole year round it has the potential of becoming a carbon shlamim as long as he doesn't have in mind l'shem Pesach. And the Gemara says, you know what? Right? Again, we'll read it again. Pesach b'Shayimos Hashana di'eno kosh l'shma v'kosh l'shma. The Gemara says, no, that's a whole different halacha. Pesach b'Shayimos Hashana shlamim ninu. So therefore, if he has shalol l'shma, which means instead of having in mind l'shem Pesach, which was originally consecrated for the Pesach, he has in mind l'shem shlamim, that's fine, because Pesach b'Shayimos Hashana has the status of shlamim. But if he has lishma, in which case he shechts the carbon for the sake of Pesach, and it's b'Shayimos Hashana, so Pesach b'Shayimos Hashana sheshachta lishma is possible. So let's just make a what they call in Hebrew a sikum beinayim, a summary in the middle of the presentation, and we have here machlokes between Rav Chilkiah and Rav Huna. And the question is, in a carbon osham shel mechusar zman, meaning prematurely, and he shechts it outside the migdash, shalol lishma, because again, if it would be lishma, then for sure he's potter, even according to Rav Chilkiah, because had he shechted it lishma in the migdash and it's shalom b'zmano, it's kodem zmano, it's premature, it'd be possible. But in the case of shalol lishma, where there was an akira, Rav Chilkiah is of the opinion that he's chayav for shchita of chutz, because had he taken it inside and had he shechted, right? Let's again get the language of Rav Chilkiah. Hoil v'roi shalol lishma lifnim. Because again, we're going back to the first Mishnah in Zevachim that a carbon shalol lishma is kosher. And on the other hand, Rav Huna is saying, no, this can't be. It can't be that if he shechts it shalol lishma, he's going to be chayav because it's like a valid carbon. Because had he done so inside the mikdash, it would be valid as a carbon, even though it's lo but it's valid carbon. According to Rav Huna, that's counterintuitive. How could you say that dafka because it was shalol lishma, therefore he's chayav because it's a keilu a carbon kosh? Now, what we're about to embark upon here on Daf Kuf Tes Vav is a whole string of brisos, which the Gemara invokes each brisa to try to bring support for Rav Chilkiah against Rav Huna. And in each case, we're going to try to defend Rav Huna. Lema Mesayele, can we bring a proof to support Rav Chilkiah from the following brisa? Now, the Torah says that that ish mi beis Yisrael asher yishchat shor o keves right? El Pesach al Moed lo hevio, and then it says v'nichras ha'ishahu mikerev hamo. So again, the Torah says El Pesach al Moed lo hevio, which means that he's going to be chayiv kares because it was royal Pesach al Moed. But if it was Eino royal Pesach al Moed, then he's potter. Yochel, I might think, based on this pasuk shani motze, that motzi means I would exclude from the chiyuv of chutz af olas mechusas man biba olav. Right. For example, let's take the case of a mitzora or yoledes, and the korban was shechted before its time, prematurely. So I might think that in that case, since it's not roy lovel pesach ol moed, because it's premature, its man hasn't arrived yet, therefore he's potter for chutz. It's not roy lovel pesach ol moed, and I might think that Hasham Noziv, Hasham Mitzora, which are brought Kodem Zmano, meaning Mechusar Zman. For example, let's say in the case of an Hasham Mitzora, he hasn't yet completed his process of Tara. But again, the Gemara is going to go into this later on. There's no need to jump ahead of the Gemara. So again, in all these cases of Mechusar Zman, I might think that therefore if he shechts it Mechusar Zman outside of the Mikdash, he should be potter because it's not roy, it's not yet mature as far as being brought in the old Moed. Talmud Lomar, we have 3 extra words in the pasuk, and as I read it before, it says Ish mi beis Yisrael shal yishchat shar o keves o eis b'machna. So the Torah specifies 3 animals, but we know that these are the 3 animals from which all korbanos are brought, and these are the only 3 animals. So why did the Torah have to in a very superfluous way, why did it have to repeat the names of these animals? Shar mikol makom, keves mikol makom, eis mikol makom. So each one of these words is coming as a ribui to teach us that in the case of a shar or keves or eis, he is not allowed to shecht it outside the Mikdash. And this includes any korban, even if the korban would not, if it was brought at that moment in time, would not fulfill the obligation of the, let's say, the mitzora or the yoledes, because it's premature, right? It's before its time. And in each one of these cases, where the korban was brought before its time, you're going to be chayav for chutz. Now, the Brisa mentions Ola and Osham, the ilu chatos shire. Why did the Brisa omit the word chatos? L'chora, chatos is the prototype for Osham, so chatos should have deserved to be mentioned here. So the Gemara now analyzes the Brisa. B'mayaskinon, ilem bismano. So then, if you want to tell me that he left out chatos for a certain reason, and we're talking about a case in which the shechita was done at its proper time, meaning it's not premature. So Rashi says here that the drasha now is not going to include liability in a case of chutz on a korban chatos that was possible. Is my iriya asham afilu chatos nami. In other words, if you're saying that it's the time has come for the carbon to be brought, that's called bismano, then he should be chayav b'chutz, both in the case of asham and in the case of chatos. I'm just not sure why we needed these ribuyim again. Let me just go over these. So I think what Rashi's trying to tell me is that we're going to have to use these the specific names of the various species of animals for some other drasha. Ella, but rather, if you're talking about this drasha and you're going to be chayav, even though it's shalom bismano, it's premature, is then why you chayav? We have these ribuyim from the three words shara kesves, but why should we chayav? It's premature. Had he brought it bifnim, he'd be potter. It's possible. So right, ilem lishma, then we can't even begin to understand why he's chayav, because if he shechted the osham lishma kodem zmano mechusas man, then it would be possible. So therefore, it's not royal level of Pesach Moed, and he should be potter from chutz. How could you have a drosha to establish he's chayav b'chutz elolav by possibly we have no choice to say but shalol lishma that he shechted it shalol lishma, and had he shechted it inside the migdash shalol lishma, it would be kosher. So this is a raya for Rav Chilkiah Bar Tuvi that if you had a shchita shalol lishma outside the migdash, you're chayav in a case of mechusas man, and the reason for that is because had you shechted shalol lishma b'fnim, it would be kosher, and now we have to find some sort of protection for Rav Huna. So the Gemara goes back to say li'olam bismana. Okay, so now we're talking about a case where he shechted it in its proper time. If he shechted it in its proper time, so then why do I need a drasha and a ribui to tell me that he's chayav? I mean, this is a classic case of chutz. But the answer is that he shechted it shalol lishma. So again, the question is, why is he chayav? He shechted the osham bismano shalol lishma b'chutz. It's not royal of Pesach Moed because if he shechted shalol lishma osham would be possible. Rabbi Lazar he diarah makshinon osham v'chatos. The chiddush here is in osham that osham is going to be equated with chatos, and therefore shalol lishma is possible. And in that case, had he had no machshava whatsoever when he shechted the carbon inside, it would be kosher. It's possible only because he had a machshava shalol lishma, and it's a carbon kosher. So therefore, I don't know, but that would be according to Chilkiah. Just 1 second. So again, Rav Eliezer equates Osham with Chatos. He has that equation. And therefore, Shalol Lishma is possible in Osham as well. Okay, so let's just see how. Sorry, how do we defend now? Of Huna. The Ola, again, the Ola Bismana. Let's go over it one more time. But Shalol Shma, and it's Rabbi Eliezer, and therefore, had he shechted Shalol Shma inside, it would be possible. And that's true for an Asham like a Chatas based on Rabbi Eliezer's equation. So what's the Chiddush of the Brisa? The Asham was shechted outside the Migdash Shelo Lishma, and why is he chayav? So why is he chayav in this case, even according to Rav Huna, when we said Shelo Lishma? I see. We're talking about Bismano. And if it's Bismano, and we hold like Rabbi Eliezer that Shelo Lishma and Asham, like Shelo Lishma and Chatos, is possible, but the carbon itself is kosher, but just lo ola Lizmano, is therefore he's going to be chayiv b'chutz, even according to Rav Huna. Meaning Rav Huna disagrees with Rav Chilkiah in the case of Shelo B'zmano, meaning it was mechus zman, it was premature. And the reason why we initially rejected interpreting this price as a case of Bismano is because then why does the Brisa single out Asham and not Chatos? And the Gemara answers, V'hu adin Tana Tofel V'hu adin Ikar. Meaning, the Brisa wants to tell me a Chiddush that Asham is like the original, which is Chatos. And therefore Shelo Lishma is possible, but nevertheless, even though it's lo ol b'ayil b'shem chova, but the carbon itself is kosher, like for example, we do the zrika and so forth. And if he shechted it b'chutz, he's chayav. Why is he chayav? Because we're holding now like Rabbi Eliezer, and if he shechted it b'chutz shelo lishma, since it was bismano, had it been bifnim, it would not be ola bailim, but it would be carbon kosher, and if he's chayav b'chutz. Okay. Toshma. Now we have a second brisa to try to support Rav Chilkiah. The brisa says, Yachal shani marbe. I might use this ribui. Remember, we had the three species of animals. Each one was superfluous and came to be marbe. I might be marbe. Olas mechusas man begufa. Right, begufa means it's before the 8th day of its birth. Chatos bein begufa bein bebola. Either it's too young before the 8th day, or the Baal has not yet come to the point where he is chai of the carbon, like for example, the chatos v'nozir mitzora, right? Which reminds me of a whole discussion about why a nozir brings a carbon chatos, but that's not for us now. And he hasn't yet undergone all his tarot, so therefore it's what? It's mechusas man. Vel pesach ol moed kol sheino roy love vel pesach ol en chayav no love. Okay, so how do we see a raya here for Rav Chilkiah? Let's see. Oh, of course, what did the Brisa mention? Ola and Chatos. And there's something very outstanding here, missing. That's obviously missing. Osham Shairi. Why didn't it mention Osham? So let's see if we could figure this out. If he had an intention of lishma when he shechted it outside, and we're talking about a premature carbon, so that means that inside, had he shechted it lishma, the carbon would be possible, and therefore we're going to darshan that Eino Roy Level Pesach Al Moed, and he's Potem Chutz, is Asham Nami Lifteri. Why did the Brisa, in a very overt, obvious way, leave out Asham? Right? Your whole point is that since it's premature, therefore it's not Roy Level of Nim, and therefore you're Potem Chutz, the same thing should apply to Asham, if it was a premature Asham. like we said before, the cases of a nazir or a mitzora. Elolav shalol lishma. Ah, so in other words, that he'd be chayav for shechting an asham bachutz if he shechts it shalol lishma. Right? Had he shechted it lishma, he'd be potter. Why? Because it's kodem zmano, and the korban kodem zmano is possible. But now we're saying that he's chayav bachutz. Why is he chayav bachutz? Because he shechted shalol lishma, which sounds like we're saying like the korban would be kosher. And that would support the shita of Chizkiah, that dafka, because he shechted it shalol lishma, then we don't need a separate akira, and we're going to say, therefore, had it was roy level of Pesach Moed, because he could have shechted it lishma inside the Mikdash. When it says liolam shalol lishma, now we're going to defend Rav Huna. Really, the Bryce is talking about a case where he shechted shalol lishma. And the reason why you're potter bachutz is because we have an equation between asham and chatos, like Rabbi Eliezer. The makish asham chatos is therefore what? Tana ikar b'kolshke l'tofel. So the Bryson wants to teach us the bigger chiddush, namely the derivative, which is asham, that's a derivative of chatos. And that's the chiddush of Rabbi Eliezer, that an asham shalol lishma is possible. And since he shechted it shalol lishma, according to Rav Huna, he's potter mibachutz, because had he shechted it inside the Mikdash shalol lishma, we hold like Rabbi Eliezer that an asham like a chata shalol lishma is possible. So it's not roy. Toshma, another brayso to try to support Rav Chilkiah, the ha'asa Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he brought a brayso. From Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he brought a brayso. Tana to Bei Rabbi Loi. He brought a brayso in the name of Rav Levi, not to be confused with Rav Levi. Rav Levi. Now, what does it say in that brayso? Yochel ani motzi. I might say you're potter for chutz af olas mechusas man bibaalim. Right? Let's say, for example, he brings a korban olah. Let's say the animal was within its first week, right before the 8 days. That's called no, that's called begufa. Just 1 second, sorry. So what's bebailov? Okay. Bebailov. Okay, but we're talking about an ola. Just 1 second. Oh yeah. Let's not forget that a nazir and a mitzora, I think, okay, I hope I'm not making a mistake here, they also have to bring a korban ola. I have to go over that one more time, sorry. And now it's mechusas man. Or, for example, another case would be Hasham Nazir, Hasham Mitzora. And these are mechusas man cases which are possible. And therefore, I might think, at this point, that if you shech them b'mechusas man outside the Mikdash, you're likely possible because it's not royal level of Mikdash. But hold on a second. Now we have a little bit of a digression that Rav Dimi right now sort of cuts in and he says, there's some sort of pasuk which the Brisa is about to quote, and I don't know what that pasuk is Omer Avina. So apparently they only had part of the brisa. They didn't have the whole brisa. So Ravina fills in the last part of the brisa that was missing. Shar mikom makom se kesev mikom makom oz mikom makom. So the brisa is saying that in the case of an asham which was premature, then he's not chayav b'chutz. No, I'm sorry. Yochel, I might think that he's not chayav b'chutz because it's mechusas man, it's not royal pesach ol moed. Talmud Lomar. Now we're going to derive from shor, kesef, and a's that he's chayav b'chutz. And what are the cases he's chayav b'chutz on? We have the case of Ola mechusas man, we have the case of Asham Nozim mechusas man, and Asham Mitzorah mechusas man. Notice that all three cases are either Ola or Asham and not Chatos. So the Brisa doesn't refer to Chatos. So let's see what the case is. If he shechted it, let's say, Bismana and Lishma, then he'd be chayiv for chatas as well. So why you bring me a ribui that he's chayiv only for an asham and an olo? What about chatas? So we're talking about a case where he shechted it shalol lishma. So it was a combination of mechusas man and shalol lishma, and we're in trouble then. Why are we in trouble then? Because it's not roy lava b'fnim. Unless we hold like Chilkiah, that since he shechted it shalol lishma, and had he shechted it shalol lishma inside, it would be kosher. Therefore, he's chayav mibachutz, and that's against Rav Huna, who says that if it's shalol lishma, then he's not chayav. And the Gemara answers, Homani Rumya. This is not a contradiction. Why did you even ask this question, right? I mean, we just already answered this question. The Brisa holds like Rebbe Lazar, and as we said before, Tana Ikar V'Kolshkein Tafel, that logic. And we're going like Rebbe Lezer, that if he shechted it shalol lishma, then we have a hekesh between asham and chatos, and just like a chatos shalol lishma passes the carbon, so too shalol lishma in asham will passel the carbon. And again, how do we answer? And therefore, so why is he chai b'chutz? Is just got to get to the cheshbon here, the mathematics. 1 second. So the truth is, we stop prematurely. I thought the Gemara's conclusion was with the word kidei ka'amrit, but no, we have to explain Omer of Nachman. So it's only after we know Rav Nachman that we're going to be able to understand and appreciate the Gemara's kasha and objection against Rav Huna and the support that it brings from this brisa for Rav Chilkiah. And this is a statement of Rav Nachman in the name of somebody, I don't know who, maybe himself. And Rami, I mistakenly thought Rami was the name of the Amor. No, Rami means he asked a question, a stira. The Tana Debei Rabbi Levi and the Tani Levi. Again, two different names. Let's not confuse them, Levi and Levi. So there's going to be two brisos. One brisa was transmitted by Rav Levi, and the other brisa was transmitted by Levi, and there's going to be a contradiction. So the brisa from Rav Levi we've already seen, and what's the brisa of Levi? Asham Nazir, Asham Mitzora, Sheshchatan Shelo Lishman, Ksherit. Oh, so I think that this is Rabbi Eliezer, meaning that just like in Chata Shelo Lishma, the carbon is kosher, but it's Eina Ola B'Ayil M'Shem Chova, Ola B'Ayil M'Shem Chova. No. I don't think we're using Rabbi Eliezer at this point. I think we're assuming that Oshem is like any carbon that was shechted Shelo Lishma, which is kosher, and not like Chatos. So that when it says here Sheshchatan Shelo Lishma Ksherim, that's not like Chatos. That's in contrast to Chatos. So I think therefore we're not going like Rabbi Eliezer at this point. That's the impression I get. I hope I'm right about that. Anyway, Shchatan Mechusar Zman Biba'alim. Right, let's say, for example, the Nazir or the Mitzorah, they're not ready for the Karban, and he went and he shechted it. Oshayu B'nei Shtei Shanim Ushchatan, right? After the animal is ready, 2 years old, it's Posel Akrova, and he went ahead and he shechted it. Psulin. So we have here a case of Shchatan Mechusar Zman, which means that we're talking about an Asham, in the case of a Nazir or a Mitzorah, that was Mechusar Zman, it was premature, and he shechted it outside of the Mikdash, and he's potter. And why is he potter? Because it would be possible in the case of a premature Asham in the Mikdash. So it's not royal at Pesach. So now we have a stira. This is Rav Nachman asking a stira. Actually, Rav Nachman named Rav Dimi. Okay, fine. The first brisa, which was brought by Rav Levi, said that Yechayev for shchitas Asham Mechusas Mano Bachutz, and here we're saying that you're potter for shchitas Asham Mechusas Mano Bachutz. And I guess that's how the Gemara is reading the word psulin here. Umeshani Rav Dimi, who asked this contradiction, gave the following answer: Lo kosher kan lishmo, ekan shelo lishmo. So I think this is going to be the support for Rav Chilkiah. I think. Let's just see the logic of it. Kan lishmo, right? We're talking about the second brisa, which we just brought Levi, which said that you're potter for chutz. And why you potter for chutz? Because you shechted it lishmo. So therefore there's no akira. And since it's mechusas man, it would be posel bifnim. But kan shelo lishma, this is the paradox of Rav Chilkiah, that dafka if you shechted it shelo lishma, which is the brisa of Rav Levi, and therefore you set your chayav, because it's roy lavu bifnim lishma. And that's because you achieve through the shalol lishma and akira. What does he say here? It is fit to be brought within, since even a premature osham brought not for its own sake is fit to be offered within. Oh. Rav Ashi Rami Masnisan Abraisa. So there's a contradiction between our Mishnah and a Braisa. This is the Braisa that we brought in the name of Rav Levoy, which that if he shechts a premature osham is chayav. Umishani, because our Mishnah says that if he shechts a premature osham outside the Migdash, he's potter. Kan lishma v'kan shelo lishma. So again, from the fact that Rav Dimi thought that these two brises were contradictory, it means that the brise of Rav Levi, which is Machayev, a premature shchita of an osham outside the Mikdash, and that's against our Mishnah that says a premature osham, or against the brisa of Levi, that a premature osham that was shechted outside the Mikdash is patur. Is lemit heavy tuvta de Rav Huna. Because again, the premise here of Rav Dimi and asking his kasha is that we have to differentiate between lishma and shalol lishma, and paradoxically, shalol lishma is chayiv b'chutz, which is the price of Rav Levi. Amalcha Rav Huna, hochmaiskin in a whole different case. Like very often they would be mafresh two karbanos just in case one animal gets lost. He has the second animal to bring. That's called a guarantee. Then he took one of the two animals for the osham, and it was premature, and he shechted it outside the chutz. The reason why he's going to be chayiv according to the brisa of Rav Levi, even according to Rav Huna, is because the halacha is that if you mafresh two karbanos for the sake of an osham, then the das is that one of the karbanos, not the one that's brought as an osham, but the spare one, will become a korban ola. And if it becomes a korban ola, then memela he's going to be chayiv for shchitas chutz. And it's irrelevant if it's premature. But again, the Gemara at this point is not going into the issue of is it mature, if it's because we're talking about a whole different case. Now, in order to understand this halacha, that if you mafresh two karbanos, two animals for the same carbon, then one of them becomes an ola. We'll have to understand another statement, which we're going to see in just a minute.